All good. Mark Morey, Secretary Unions, New South Wales. I have the HSU, the nurses, the PSA and the teachers with me who will also make statements. What we've seen today is probably the worst act of intimidation of union members. The second part of the motion put forward today by the Minister for Industrial Relations removes New South Wales as a no-cost jurisdiction. It will be the only jurisdiction in the country where workers can be fined and then have costs assigned to them. What this is about intimidating workers, particularly cleaners, teachers, nurses, paramedics, who are doing their job. This is an attempt by this government to silence workers who, after 12 years of this government, have had enough. They've had their wages cut, they've worked through COVID, they've seen many of their colleagues leave and positions not filled, and now we have a workforce under pressure, and the pressure they are under means we have a health system, an education system and a broader public sector that is on the verge of collapse under this pressure. This government is doing nothing to retain skilled workers in New South Wales. Many workers are saying, I want to move to a state where I can buy a house and I can walk to work. These workers are sick of travelling 2 or more hours to and from work every day. This government is supposed to be negotiating with unions and their members. This government has failed to negotiate with unions and its members. In fact, it puts offers on the table, then takes them off, then puts them back on, then takes them off, and then argues with other ministers. This is a government that's not in charge or in control of the economy or its workforce. Under Gladys Berejiklian, we were never in this position. I don't think these people are up to actually running the state, let alone a budget. But the worst thing is they are squandering the best asset they have, which is their public sector workforce. I'll hand over to the other unions now.
Hi, I'm Nicole Jess, the President of the Public Service Association. I'm also the Chairperson of the Prison Officers Vocational Branch. Today this announcement is just bully boy tactics, trying to intimidate us and stop us from our democratic right to strike. Prison officers work in a really dangerous job, and most of the time we strike because of safety issues. And for them to be for this act to come in and to stop us from the ability to strike for our safety, it is not only against our democratic rights, but it's going to put us under a lot more pressure and work in an unsafe environment. Thank you.
I'm Maxine Sharkey, General Secretary of the New South Wales Teachers Federation. This is just absolute disrespect towards workers in general, but towards the workforce that this government pays and relies on to run the economy, to run the state. It's workers who keep the economy running. It's teachers who educate the next premier. Our state can't function without public sector workers. This is bullying at the highest degree. We can't stand for this. Who's next? What sort of a government do we want? One that respects workers, or one that wields a big axe and intimidates and bullies? We don't allow this in our classroom. We shouldn't allow this in our parliament. Thank you.
My name's Michael Waits. I'm the Acting Assistant General Secretary for the New South Wales Nurses and Midwives Association. Nurses and midwives in this state are confronted by a government who does not even comply with their own wages policy. A policy that requires them to have their bargaining parameters to the union 3 months ahead of the expiry of their award. 3 months ago, they should have had those bargaining parameters to us. They gave them to us last week. This is a government whose tactic is to wedge nurses and midwives into a no-win, no-compromise situation. And when nurses and midwives start to call out the hollow promises that this Premier is making around 10,100 additional healthcare workers, when we challenge the reality of that figure, when nurses and midwives are faced in ED departments that have double the patients that they have bed spaces, when we call out how unsafe the public health system is, the Premier's only response is to tell arguably the largest single female workforce in this state to sit down, shut up and get on with it. Well, we will not be silenced. We will continue to call out this government. We will continue to call out the shadows and the hollow announcements that they are making, and we will continue to advocate for safer patient care in these hospitals. These are bad laws. They need not be amended in the first place. You should not fine nurses and midwives for coming out and telling the public what life is like. Thank you.
Gerard Hayes from the HSU. The government yet again has grown the union movement today. We're already seeing people joining the union today because they see that this is just an outrageous issue. We were all here about 2 years ago when we were all in it together, and clearly we're not now. So it's pretty short-sighted in my view from the government. The government's taken a position not to work with unions because they don't know how to work with unions. But can I also say, the unions, their members are part of the community right across New South Wales. They're not some evil group from overseas or anywhere else. They are people who rely on a government to bring out good opportunities, and they work through unions to negotiate for those good opportunities. Now, if the government can't do that or doesn't know how to do that, we're happy to educate them. But what they've done today, make no mistake, is supported growth within the union movement. They have aligned the union movement, and bearing in mind the 25th of March next year isn't too far away. Thanks very much.
Would any of the recent strike action by teachers, nurses, PSA have been caught under this legislation and resulted in a fine?
Some of them have. I'm happy to let them speak, but a number of the unions are currently in the Supreme Court fighting fines from previous actions. No, he is now removing a no-cost jurisdiction. Other states have that. It's the same at the federal level, even under work choices. What the Premier is doing today is saying he's going to wage a jihad on the lowest paid and women in our workforce who are speaking out now as teachers, nurses and cleaners. He's saying, if you speak out against my government, I will come after you. That's a threat that no one should have hanging over their head in a workplace when they're overworked, the resources aren't provided, it's unsafe, and the only way to make that point after 12 years of this government is to take industrial action.
But isn't he only saying they can't take the industrial action if the independent umpire, IRC, deems it illegal?
The IRC has deemed every strike recently just about illegal. I don't think the IRC is up to the modern workforce in which we work in. I think it's an antiquated system. It is a system that doesn't allow us to have productivity negotiations. It is a system that no longer has the capacity to resolve disputes in a way that there are both winners and not just simply winners and losers. It is an institution, harking back to the 1800s, it needs to be changed. So in Victoria, there are no major agreements up. They have a different system. So when you say you have a wages cap, that's true. But the way in which that cap operates is very different in each jurisdiction. And there's flexibility, there's productivity, which is made available. This is a jurisdiction for 10, 11 years, they've said it is 2.5. Either take it or leave it. In fact, it isn't 2.5. 2 years ago, they said it's up to 2.5, and workers, those who got us through the pandemic, got 0.3% pay increase. 0.3%. On one hand, they're patting workers on the back, and with the other hand, they're taking money out of their wallets. You cannot retain a skilled workforce if you are not paying them properly. You cannot retain a skilled workforce when there are vacant positions on wards, in schools, in broader public sector workplaces. This is not just about pay, this is about retaining workers so people aren't working under stress and in unsafe conditions. My experience of governments of all ilks is the union movement will struggle. We will fight to make sure our claims are heard, and we will continue to put pressure on whatever person is in government. I remember 2011 when the former Labor Party brought in this policy of a wages cap. The union movement is not dependent on what party's in power. The union movement is dependent on its members, and its members are the democratic process in which we organise, we prosecute our arguments, and we try to get the best outcome for our members.
Yes.
Nurses and midwives in New South Wales have been pushed into this situation by a government who refuses to negotiate and refuses to listen. When we ask about the IR laws in New South Wales, they are fundamentally broken. When nurses and midwives go to government and say, what we need is more midwives, what we need is more nurses in our ED department, they say to us, you can only have that if you're willing to trade off your overtime, your sick leave, or something else. Why should nurses and midwives have to pay to put more healthcare workers into the healthcare system? That's the proposition that this government has put to us each and every time. And the Industrial Relations Commission has no power to say to the government, you must employ more nurses and midwives. And again, I put to you, they're in breach of their own policy. They should have been at the table with us 3 months ago. Last week, on the 16th, they notified us that they have the bargaining parameters, and it was 3%, nothing else, take it or leave it. That's a broken system. How else do we respond other than getting out on the street and appealing to the community to support us, appealing to the politicians to support us? We have no other avenue. The laws in New South Wales are broken when public sector workers are the only workers in the country who don't have the right to bargain in good faith.
And just on that, this government has known for 10 years, in their own publications, they've known for 10 years that we're looking down the barrel of a shortage of teachers in this state. They've known that. Why don't we attract teachers? We don't attract teachers because we don't pay teachers commensurate with other professions that they have qualifications for. And instead of thanking teachers and giving them a just pay rise, this government is threatening teachers who are drawing attention to the fact that our kids, your kids, are suffering from this. Your kids are suffering because this government has known for 10 years we have a shortage of teachers coming up, and we are in that shortage now. This government is doing nothing to help to educate your children, the children who are the future of this state. Instead, this government is bullying the teachers who are making sure that under the most trying circumstances of COVID and of continual sickness in our schools, that somebody is there to care for your children.
So if the IRC next week before Thursday deems the Thursday action illegal, will it go ahead?
Our members have to be heard. Teachers want to be heard. They're not heard when this government has not even sat down and spoken to the union that represents the teachers who are trying to voice
Sarah
their...
Mitchell said yesterday, I asked her that, she said she spoke to Angelo last week. Is that she lying?
No, she's not. She spoke with Angelo. We had negotiations for this round of negotiations, and the Department of Education met with us once before instituting the Industrial Relations Commission to bring down a hearing. Meeting with us once is not bargaining or negotiating in good faith.
Can I just ask you, these amendments for the increased funds are going to get through Parliament. The Coalition doesn't control the upper house. There's
No.
likely a chance of getting
I think this was a stunt by a desperate government that doesn't know how to negotiate with the union movement, doesn't know how to negotiate with its workforce, and is trying to blame everyone but themselves. I don't think this was, it was thought out in the way of disrupting our action, disrupting whatever's going on in Parliament today. It is simply a stunt by a minister who's out of his depth.
Are you disappointed that Labor last night voted against the bill to remove the wages cut?
I am, and I voiced my concern very strongly. And I said at that time, anyone who puts up a bill to remove the wages cap, I will support, and I was supportive of what the shooters were doing last night, and I urged them over the last couple of weeks to support that bill.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We seriously need a